It's Friday evening at We Love Guitars, and just for you people who don't live in the UK, this is early summer in the UK. It's the 20-something, 4th or something of April or more, and we are really getting, it's cold, it's raining a lot, and it's just plain horrible. And yeah, the cold thing is the trees are all blooming and blossoming and coming out sort of thing, but they the temperature doesn't want to play, so it's nice and cold. Anyway, enough of that. It's Friday evening, so what we got here, well, I've already done some stuff while I was waiting for my batteries to charge, so I've pretty much completed the setup on Adam's parts caster there. Well, no, sorry, not parts caster, Squire with some improvements. And that just needs restringing, which I'll do at home actually. And so what we've got here tonight is Lawrence's professional USA professional Telecaster, in for a setup and a change of pickguard. There was a discussion about whether the bridge plate would change, sorry, the control plate would change as well, but we've ended up not. Anyway, so, because I think we couldn't get one, we couldn't find one that fitted. So what have we got here? Well, we've got some new tuners, we've got new strings, we've got the new measurements that I've taken over here. I'll come back to them in a minute, but beautifully made, lovely, lovely Telecaster, gorgeous rosewood fingerboard. Actually, you can't get better than that sort of nice, luminous, almost rosewood, some red running down it. Paired, compensated. I can hear my swallows outside. Compensated saddles, and of course it's left-handed, so I can't enjoy the thrill of playing it. Push switch here, which I don't know what it does, but it's not really critically important right now. So overall, this is, oh, it's got a kind of comfort enhanced thingy there. So it's the American Professional 2, I forgot to say, the 2. Lovely satin neck, and yeah, regular Fender tuners, but we're going to put on Fender locking tuners instead. So nothing other than a good, solid, great looking. I mean, I like the combination between that gloss there and this just really nice soft satin feel all the way through on the neck. It's interesting that I can see, when you look up close at the frets, you can see where the kind of finishing has gone over. Not so much good light here, but yeah, you can see the finish has gone over, where it's been done over, kind of almost hand finished over the ends of the frets there by the looks of things. So I was kind of wondering whether this was a refret somewhere down the line, but I'm not sure. Anyway, what I did notice on a close-up inspection of the frets was I don't think these frets have been leveled in the factory or anywhere else, so I can't see any evidence of it, but I could be wrong. What we've got as a playability, first thing to say is the nut is a very beautiful kind of factory Corian job with a bit of lacquer over the ends and stuff to make it nice. But this is currently way too low on the low action that I've set since having a kind of play through and finding out where the problems are. So having set a very low action at the other end, this is now too low. So we are going to replace this. In fact, it's the D and the G which are too low. So there's a kind of mismatch, very slight mismatch between the nut and the radius of the frets. But that's also not uncommon, but you only really notice it when you get down to a low action. So I've set this to my target low action. I noticed first of all that the high E was set quite a bit higher. It was set at about 1.8 millimeters, so about half a mil higher than I would have it a target anyway. The relief is very, very flat. Now the thing about the relief being really, really flat is I tend to try and make it work, everything work with the relief as is, because, excuse me, the relief being flat is one of the things that customers know is quite an important part of the feel of a customer's guitar. So whereas I could say, well, it needs a bit more room and I could add some more relief in. The amount that changes the feel is not worth the gain I would get from that little bit of extra space. So I will sort of move that part of it. I'll adjust that part of it at a last resort kind of thing. I really want to keep that part the same. What we want to get is as low as we can with a combination of fret leveling and action setting. So I've had a playthrough. So what we've got intonation is spot on, which is great considering it's a staggered thing, but it just shows you that the pre-compensation on those brass pairs are actually very good. So we've got good intonation. There's a loose Strat button on the back to tighten up. We've got the relief of very, very little, probably under 1/10 of a mil. Now we've got the high E at the last fret, where I measure it, that's my preference, is 1.8 millimeters and 1.5 on the low E. So that's at the target that I would normally have. That's a little bit high. But what I noticed at this low action, so I basically set this down to 1.2 and left that where it was. And at that setting, we've got high E choking at the 16th fret. It chokes on the 17th. So bends, sorry, only on bends. It plays fine. But on bends, bending at the 16th on the E and the B. On the E, it chokes out on the 17th, and the B, it sort of half chokes. So that's where I would expect to find a low spot at the 16th. So just for the sake of visual argument, just for the sake of reference, I'm going to put a mark on the tape on there, a bit of green frog tape. So that will tell me that when we do the fret leveling, I expect to see nothing cutting on here, or I expect to see the 17th being very high. It's probably more likely a low spot here, which tends to be the way as we get up to here. So I will change the nut. I will change the plate, but the first thing I'll do is I'll change the nut and then I'll do the fret leveling part of it, keeping the action all the same to the beginning. Once that's done, I'll take all the strings off, we'll recrown it, I'll sand out all the sand out and polish the frets, and then when it's dusted down and cleaned up, we'll take the plate off and swap over the plates. Okay, it's got a metal string tree, which now I will take this home with me. I'm pretty sure we agreed on the switch over of the string tree, but I haven't got my blasted notebook here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this home with me along with a few other bits and pieces, so I can do a couple of things at home. And yeah, so I'll change that over at home if necessary, and we'll keep that in the box. Okay, so the first thing to do then is, strangely enough, the nut. And here is our tusk replacement. It's obviously a lefty nut, and it's for a 9.5 inch radius lefty Strat. Now, when I've got lucky with these little things, they have sometimes been a perfect drop-in without any major issues, and that's spot on the right sizing. What I find that is the only Fender style guitars that Tusk's replacement nuts tend to fit without any question tends to be the USA Fender. So I have a sort of feeling that Tusk has just lined it up for that particular instrument, and then every variation from that can sing for it, you know, isn't necessarily going to fit. And so there are quite a lot of other models that these nuts are not drop-in replacements. Now I'd be kind of what I don't know the word is. I would be blighting my luck if I would say this will be a drop-in, because it probably won't. So we've got some finish backed up down the side here, which is a fairly common thing to find. Some feel it looks nicer. To be honest, I'm not really bothered when when you have that over the ends. It just looks like you've spilled the finish, really, because it doesn't sit very tidily up the side. If you look at the nut, it's just a sort of, it's like a little splash, which doesn't quite fit, if you see what I mean. But I get it. It looks like it's sealed in. Now that's fine, except for the fact that sealing it in provides us or presents us with slight problems, or more problems than if it wasn't. And one of the issues here is that we have to gently cut back against the nut to release any grip. Now, when I'm replacing a nut, what I might actually just do on this one is I may just grab these 3 strings here. These strings are going to be used as sacrificial strings, so I'm going to get this on here. And I'm just going to slack them off until I can get them under this little thing here, with a wooden divot. It's a bit of a pull, but it'll go. I'll do the same here. Obviously I don't need to change the tuners yet. That's sort of not a critical part of the thing. I like to do the nut and the setup, and in part that's because that is the hardest part of all of this, getting that right. Now, having moved those out of the way, I've now made it impossible for me to do another part of what I was aiming to do, but never mind, we'll come back to that. So here's my little cut along the edge of the nut, and I'm doing that strictly against the bone or the corian itself, which means that when it comes out it'll probably leave a little lip, but that's okay. Now I think what I'll do is I'm going to write a note to myself. I'm going to buy myself a string spreader. I've got a note here about masking tape. So string spreaders, they're not expensive. See that? Right. Well, yeah, so that's the idea here will be to do the setup part of stuff first. Let's get that over there, like so. And let's get this one, sorry about this, around here, out of the way. Like as so. Something like that. Okay, so what I'm now going to want to do, and of course I'm not really checking very carefully to see what you can see, but you can see there. I'm now going to hold the guitar with under my armpit basically, and I'm going to run my blade, my scalpel, along the finish on the base of this nut. Because we just want to cut, if possible, the finish so that it'll come off the nut now, flake off quite nicely, but I'm just trying to minimize the flaking. It's trying to flake off the front here a tiny bit, but such is life. And then we turn it over and hopefully we do the same. Now I was originally, before I got to measuring the actual playing action over the first fret, or the action of the strings at the first fret, I was considering approaching the nut from a it's not broke so let's not fix it kind of standpoint, and in many ways that's not a bad approach to take, because quite frankly, you know, if it's doing its job, if you can't really detect any tuning issues coming from it, then you know, it is a good enough question to say, well, why would we change it? We could argue that we would change it because Tusk is a little bit better in terms of its ability to allow the strings to run smoothly, but this is a pretty well made nut as it happens. But the decision was made on the basis of those, the D and the G action being too whatever the word is I'm looking for, too low. Too low, that's what it was. I hope you can see. Let me just now get me little hammer out and my thingy. So now the idea is I'm going to gently attempt to drift this nut out if I can. Well, that didn't want to go, so that's chipped a little bit. So it's okay, but the problem about getting the nut out is if it comes to it, if it's glued in or if it's overly tight, I may have to resort to cutting it out, which I've done many times before. Although it's much nicer to be able to tap it out like so. Okay, mostly, except for that. So it's a rounded one, but that's okay. We've got a little bit of glue in there. I'm not sure that's why this wasn't coming out, but something didn't wish to comply. Let's try again from this end. There we go. So occasionally, or in some situations, you can help to put a little dent or drill a little blob in the end of the thing, and that means you can basically give the screwdriver. Oops, there goes one. Give the screwdriver something to purchase. Give it some purchase. What's it buying? Where's my thing gone? There it is. It's so good having a magnet on the end of a thing attached to a screw. Right, so what I'm going to do, as we've got this out, I'm going to fetch the thing I probably need to keep out anyway, my digital caliper. I'm going to measure the thickness of this. Come on. Measure the thickness of this. So we're going to need to get the new one to exactly this. So 318, 314, 315, 313. I'm going to call it 314 or 315. Let's be on the safe side. 315 wide. 315 wide. So I need to make this next one 315, but we also need to clean out this little slot in here. So to begin with, when we measure the tusk replacement, we get 322. So it's very close. So it's not exactly a drop in, but it's not too far off. So it's a little bit of flat sanding. Before I do that, I'm going to get a fresh blade, and we're just going to gently get these blades in quite a big bulk, but they're not that strong. They don't last too well. But the plus side is you can always get a fresh one straight out. So this thing is the glue has held a bit of glue and some plastic or corian, whatever it's called, in the bottom of this slot. So I just want to try and coax it out. Right, now first thing I'm going to do is, or the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my little small sanding blocks out. And I'm going to put my tusk nut down on there and give it some flat sanding on its widest face. So remember we're looking for 315, so that's 320, 321, 321. So I'll do a little bit more on this rougher sandpaper and try and keep the weight over the front edge a little bit. And then we'll follow it up on the finer paper. 317, 319, 18, 17. Right, so we're very close to it, and of course the thing is, the proof that we're close or not quite there is that it won't quite fit in there. It'll hang in there, which is fine, but not exactly where we want. Now, it's it's a curved slot, so we're going to need to get rid of this little curved bit in a minute, but I'll take care of that in a second. So first of all, I'm just going to use this finer 240 grip, but it's a bit worn out, so it'll be very slow cutting, but we'll get it hopefully down to 315, at which point we'll start to see it kind of fit in nicely. Now there's a little, there's a tiny ridge of, what would we call it? A very small ridge of sticking up thingy, sticking up finish, which I might just do something you probably can't see. I might just gently sand forward on. Basically, I don't want it kind of threatening to lift up or pull back and create any, pull anything up. That's not the best one to do it with. Let's find a flat-ended one. No. Oh gosh. There we are. There's one. That might do. Got millions of these ancient knackered old things, but I feel like I want to cut this one off with a cutting thing. Yes, Sam, that would be the thing you cut it with. It's not at all handling the way I want. How about I just go down here like this? Yeah, well, that's actually probably needs a bit more than that even, but I'm just trying to sort of level it off so that we don't get any peel back. Actually, we can probably do it quite flat on. There we go. That's just a little technical cautionary thing. Okay, I'm just going to get the sanding drum thing, and I'm just going to take off this little, no, I'm not going to do it like that. I'm just going to take off the little leg in the center, which is used when you use it in a flat slot. Again, this is something that's just done by careful feel and touchy-feely. Take off a little edge bit there. Okay, that's pretty much good. Could be a tiny little bit of, what's the word? I don't know what the word is. What am I looking for? I don't want to do that. I want to do maybe this. Get a little bit of sandpaper and roll it into a ball. Again, this is 240. Not a ball, a tube. So while you're over there, I'm just going to run lightly backwards and forwards to iron out any difference in that. Okay, that feels good. You can stay there to be reused. Okay, so in terms of its thickness now, we're very close to it fitting. I don't want to pressure it, so it's really important not to squeeze it in there. It's tempting to squeeze it in so that it fits without glue. That's quite a nice thing to achieve. I like to achieve that. But if it is too tight, the chances are you have a risk of it cracking any finish, which you really don't want to do. So it's better that it's a little bit loose if you have to have it one way, but you know, not at all would be the ideal thing. So you know, the advice would be keep on sanding. Blimey, I'm going for a jam tomorrow in Plymouth with some old friends who I played with last year. Was it last year or the year before? I can't even remember. Dave, customer of mine, and whose wedding we played at, so including Dave. So he's the serial rally buyer, although he's now I think he's lost his rally obsession a little bit, and he's now into other types. Right, so we're kind of getting it in there, but it's still not completely fit. Now the hard thing about sanding these nuts is this curved front edge doesn't get quite such a look in on the sanding as the flatter bit of the back, no, the bottom part of it. For some reason it seems to tend to end up creating a lean away from the front edge, from this top bit here, the thinner part. It needs to be pushed a bit further on to get it to cut right. Okay, we are almost there. Let me just check. No, I don't want to do that. I was going to get my little slot cleaner out to thing, but I really don't want to do that because the bottom line is it's flat and this is a curved thing, and I don't actually have a tool for cleaning cleaning a curved nut slot, which is why I use the kind of edge of these, so that even though it's going like that, it's still doing the job. Back to front, that would not help. Okay, I think we're just at the seated in position now. Now, we won't know whether it's a perfect drop in until such a time as we fit the strings and see what it lines up again as, and then we'll know how much reduction. What would be nice is to reduce it without having to cut the slots. I've made this hard for myself, haven't I? Sorry about this, it just looks ridiculous. So I'm just cutting down here. Thank you. Still difficult. Yeah, so I always try to get it so that it goes on without needing to cut the factory slots, as I refer to them. But we shall see whether we get away with that. The reality is, actually, I seem to remember these are pretty drop-in-ish, so we may be in the lucky side. If it comes to it, rather than try and clumsily keep going from underneath, it is better to finally resort to using the files. I mean, that's what they're there for. It kind of dents my ego a little. No, not my ego, but I set out to try and do it without that, and if I have to, I will settle for it. So it looks pretty good. Frog tape does an amazing thing when it sticks itself to itself. It's about the only thing it really sticks to very well. I'm not complaining, it's a very good material. It's fantastic for masking things off, but it doesn't have a lot of stickiness other than when it meets itself, which I suppose is why it makes such a good masking substance. Okay, we are seated. That is pretty good. We're a little bit higher than we need, and depending on the balance of the highness, will determine whether or not it's worth cutting from underneath or cutting from above. Let's get a quick look. I think we'll probably be about 0.4 of a mil, something like that, so it's not a huge amount high. Yeah, about 0.4 on that, and coming over to, it's very close actually, so let's leave it where it is for the time being. Now of course we can put a dab of glue in there as and when. So let me throw the broken nut away. There's no point keeping that. It served its purpose as far as measuring is concerned. And now we can get rid of this scrap. Okay, So now, having done that and having felt that that works perfectly fine now for the purposes of the next stage, which is fret leveling, I'm just going to slack these off again for a minute. Yeah, so tomorrow going over to Plymouth for a little jam session, and also had a rehearse this week with another customer and bunch of friends as well, local friends, which is nice too. And that's going to be ongoing. So we've got another one on Monday, and so I think it'll probably be once every couple of weeks until mid-June. We do a sort of fun party gig. Oh yeah, that's what that was. That's amazing. I wouldn't know. You probably saw that on video. Taking these things off spat the nut out at me, which it will do unless it's glued down. So that fired that across the room. Thankfully, I only knew about it when it clattered on the floor. No, I didn't say the other thing you thought I was going to say just there. That would have been a mistake, wouldn't it? Anyway, sorry about that. So what I'm doing at this point, I'm just marking off the frets. The strings we got on here are sacrificial, so it don't matter if I get them dirty. We're marking off the frets for the purpose of precision leveling this. Now the great thing about this is it doesn't matter to me whether this is a left or right-handed guitar at this, for doing this work. It's a pity for me in the sense that I can't play the guitar and or enjoy it in the same sort of way, and I can't quite experience it in the same sort of way either. I wouldn't pretend otherwise, because I can't. But having said that, as far as I remember some years ago when I came to do my first left-handed setup, I was nervous because I thought, well, I haven't done left-handed setups, have I? Then after I'd done a couple, I realised that I could do them perfectly well. It was just a matter of doing the same things, and as long as I could, bend the strings and so on, I could make it work. But it was, I remember when I first did it, it was, ooh, how do I do it? Is it different from right hand? Well, same principles apply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tune it up. Now the one thing I noticed when I was set this to its correct height, there was because of the thinness of the strings, you can get a tiny bit of, so it's nines on a long scale Fender. You hear that little bit of. Now we'll see how much I can alleviate that with the leveling, but that's mainly probably because it's a very flat, less than a tenth of a millimeter relief. So I'm kind of got that earmarked in my brain, thinking that's why we might need to make the adjustment. Okay, right, so now's the time to do the leveling. Get the leveling beam, which has still got some fairly fresh sandpaper on it. So what I'm going to do, if I run out of time tonight, I will I'll get this done, and I may have to do the changeover later tomorrow, no, Sunday. But this will be, I think I'm not in an actual rush for this. I think 9th of May is Lawrence's target for this, but my timetable says get it done now, because I've got so many other things to do. Right, so the fact that this tool has got no curvature in it at all, or it's as loose as it can be, and yet it's registering as touching this, tells me this is dead flat, or nearly dead flat, which I know anyway. So there's my the banana tool is calibrated to that. Just going to put that off the side like so, and then we get going. Now, reversing this, so we're working on left-handed, and I'm starting on the low strings, the fat strings first, or the bass side of the frets. I'm going to be thinking about it from the point of view of what I think about when I'm doing it on this side, when it's the right-handed guitar. So here I'm thinking that we've got some, well, I'm not looking so much for individual high or low frets. What I'm expecting to find more than anything is some little clusters of high and low frets, which, if I find them, usually tend to explain why I'm getting that fret slap. I call fret slap. So as an immediate kind of look down here, I'm dead right about this 16th fret. This is what I love, right? So you want to know how I know this process works. Okay, remember I said to you on the 16th fret it's probably low. See that? All the way, all the way across, you're going to find this fret doesn't get cut by the thing at all. So the fact it's cutting either side, and a bit heavier on the right side than the left, but you can see that compared to its neighbours, that one fret is low. Isn't that amazing? That is, I mean, I keep trying to photograph it, but it's never as good as seeing it with my own eyes. It never looks as convincing. But that tells me exactly what my playing told me, that the high E bend, for example, on the 16th was choking out on the 17th, and I said to you at the beginning of this, I suspect that the 16th fret is low by comparison to its neighbours. And there, with our little green thing pointing at the 16th, which is there, the actual first pass of fret levelling proves exactly what I suspected. So you see how reassuring that is. Now what it's telling me further down the way is it's telling me cutting, 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 low, cutting higher, that's the high fret, that's cutting more than the one next to it, hardly any, so that's back low again, high again, relative, sorry, I've just got an email come through there. I'm supposed to be switched off, so there shouldn't be anything coming through. So even, a little bit lower, very low, up again, and one low one at the two low ones at the end, judging by there. So that's the first run through of the fret leveling tool on the low E, and that's the first run I always do, whether it's low E or high E on a right-handed guitar, is always a run that tells me something. It's diagnostic, so it tells me, and in this case it confirms what I discovered just by playing it, that in fact we've got a low 16th fret, which is why the high E string is bending, going across and trying to bend the note. Now that's improved. Well, it is a playing position, to be fair. So we have a tiny bit of, this is the flat neck, and I can, if you really want to prove this, you can basically bend the neck and make it go away. See that? Almost not. So if you want to know that whether that's about the shape of your neck or not, I'm telling you it is. This big fat string has to move a lot. Now a lot of the time we can ease it off by this process that I'm doing right now of using the leveling tool to, if you like, just even up or take down the high clusters of frets. And that, if you think about normal fret leveling or fret leveling that we normally think of, that's what we're doing anyway. We're taking down high frets, but actually when you do this a while, you'll realize that the most common thing, the thing you're really doing most of the time, is you are taking down groups of frets to bottom out one or two low spots. And those spots are low usually not because, well, always not because somebody's hit the fret extra hard to make it seat. It's low because that fret is in a little kind of momentary dip in the fingerboard, which is quite incredible when you think about it, that there can be such a variation. There it is. Yeah, you could actually have such a variation. So the other thing you need to have, can you see something? Oh, this is buzzing on there. Yeah, the other thing that requires experience is to be confident that doing this I haven't taken any serious amount of metal off the frets. So 16 sounds a little bit squelchier than the 17th. They're all making a slight amount of noise, and what I would suggest at this point in time is we get the Fender USA truss rod adjuster, and I think this guitar will need to be a tiny bit, wow, that was quite stiff, a tiny bit relieved. I think there's, if having it dead flat the way it was is going to create a continuous buzz, then then we're keep checking. So I'm just making sure. I would say that's currently that's about 1/10 of a mil now. If we want to be certain, if we don't like guessing at those things, you've got to remember that it doesn't matter what the actual measurement is. What it matters is that it's as more or less. No, it's what you need, not any more ideally. The only downside of it being more than you need is it makes the guitar feel a little bit harder to play because of the action is sitting a lot higher. 0.1. Bit more than 0.1 then. So I would be aiming for about 0.25 on a guitar like this. So let's just see if we're anywhere near that right now. Yeah, that's about 0.25. Okay, so that's sort of where you'd want it. So, with 0.25, let's look at the amount of work. I'm going to do a tiny bit more and then move across to the next one and reconsider again afterwards. So that, in a sense, you saw some of the judgment calls being made there about what we need to do, what we can do. Now, when I'm trying to iron out these little peaks and troughs, or iron the troughs down, sorry, the peaks down a little bit so they come closer to where the troughs are. What I'm really trying to do is just use backwards and forwards and mostly gravity. I'm not trying to push down too far at all. I really want to. I don't want to flatten the tool out any. I just want it to do its job. Now, just beginning to connect that low fret or that low spot, which is probably about where that will be. Problems associated with that will be minimized. I'm just going to double check the playing action here as well to make sure we're not under. Sometimes without noticing things can change. That's still about 0.5, no sorry 1.5. So it's not bad, you know. I'm going to call that done for now, and I'm going to go straight on to the next one, and I will expect to find the same low spot, and I'll expect to be needing to do a sort of similar amount to it, and again sort of side to side, a little bit backwards and forwards. I'm not really moving more than about a total inch, an inch in total I should say. This starting with the bass strings is, and the bass tracks on the neck is the harder part. The treble ones are always the easier one, and the simple reason for that is that they don't move as much when struck. Obviously a 9's plain string will move a little bit more than a 10 or an 11, but generally speaking internally related, so comparing the plain string to the fat wound string, the amount of movement is tiny by comparison. So we expect, if we want to have a low action and a fairly flat neck on a guitar like this, we expect to need to work a little harder. It's close to where I want it. 1.5, just over 1.5, then it comes down a bit, and that's right. I'll do a tiny bit more on this A track, but I think we're close to where I want to be. One thing that is important to point out is that if you're a heavy hitter or hard hitter, if that happens to be your playing style, then you can't kind of beat the system of physics. So the harder a string is struck, and the thicker it is, the more wound it is, and or the shorter the scale. All those things contribute to the string moving a lot more than if it were all the other things, like a thicker gauge, a longer scale, a lighter touch, and so on. So it's all about those things contributing together to make the string move a lot. And whatever the outcome of that is, your string has to have the room to move. And if it doesn't, it will strike the frets, as you were hearing with that, what I call fret slap. And most of my effort is in alleviating the fret slap on guitars like this. But if I have it below a certain action, or if I have it really, really flat, then you reach a point of diminishing returns, because you may not be able to level it into submission, because below a certain playing action and with a certain amount of strength of hit, it may be that you simply can't, there isn't simply enough room, no matter what you do with leveling or anything else, there simply isn't enough room for the strings to move, because the string is going to move if you hit it really hard. The string is going to move harder if you hit it really hard, and the string is a wound thick one, and so on. And if it's a shorter scale, it'll move further still, because it'll be less tension, and so on and so forth. So you can't beat that system. You are constrained by it. And there are times when, if somebody's playing style happens to be a little bit harder, then all you can do is raise the action a tiny fraction. But my job here is to get the lowest possible without having to compromise the action. And really the place I make a little bit of difference, as you can see, is in the leveling side of things. But it has its limits, and I'm not afraid to say so. So far, I've found that doing this can improve it either completely, or clear it up completely, or improve it substantially, if not completely. And that's knowing the limits. So even though this 16th fret is still showing up as low at this point, it's not bad. Now we're coming across into what I call the G track, and this is now important for a different reason, and you've probably heard me say this if you watch me going the other way on a right-handed guitar. The G track is the place where, if there are any of these highs and lows, which clearly we know there are because this one's low and therefore the ones after it are effectively high, but that comes into play down on the thick strings as a fret slap. But when we get to the G track, where the G string sits, now what we're looking for, or the consequence of this low fret, is when we push this E across into this G track. If this fret is low to begin with, then it's going to struggle to clear the next fret. But if there are any unevennesses in the G track as well, they will get in the way of the E string's clearance that it needs. Now I know that the problem isn't really in the G track here, in the sense that seeing this low fret up here all the time, knowing that it's caused by a low fret, means that I know what the cause is. It isn't a single high fret in the way, which sometimes is the case in the G track. But I have to say, more often than not, it's very, very similar situation. It's it's the fact that we're bending the E from a starting point of a low spot or a trench, and so that by the time it gets to across into the G, there's nothing particularly wrong with the G track any more than anything else, but because we're starting the E bend in a ditch, that's why it's choking out on the 17th. So can you imagine the Plek machine thinking this through? Now I know that at this point the G will play all the way up, you can hear that slight consequence of going in the ditch there, but it's not so bad. But what I now care about is this bend. Let's see what happens when I bend the E. Okay, so the E on the bend on the 16th is still choking out on this spot here on the 17th fret. It's choking out on the bend as it comes across. So if I want that to play, oops, put that on the actual 17th fret now where it's choking out. And having done that, so you saw that when I did the bend on the 16th, actually it's not too bad. That's actually nearly, it's just bad fretting, but that's actually technically playing all the way through now. I'll do a tiny bit more up here just to make sure, but there we go. That's not bad. So when I know I'm working on one spot, I tend to focus my attention on that one spot. So it basically means I'll press a tiny bit of pressure down at this end versus that end. It'll be leveling all the way across, so it's not just dealing with one part and creating problems. But what I'm just aiming to do is make sure this G track lets that note bend perfectly. And if you've got the strength, because I mean it's not 10 gauge, it's 9, but my fingers are pretty weak. I'm not really doing very well bending that direction. I think it might be the left hand direction. He says, begging for your understanding. It's actually I can't turn my hand around and push it up, so I'm having to pull it down, which is a very odd movement. So if I were to do that, so that's actually probably back on just as we go into the D, which actually is going over the hill, if you might call it. So I'll just do a tiny bit more in that D track at that end. But really, once you go over the hill, the geometry is working against you. You may not be able to get that large a bend out of the situation. But I'm concentrating now on the 17th fret and its surrounding ones, or the 16th one I should say, and its surrounding ones. But that should be fine. Yeah, I mean, with the geometry of the neck, there's a limit. Unless you have a very high action, you can't bend all the way up the full distance of the fretboard because that's a pretty big bend to start with, but it's also pushing uphill and then back downhill, which cancels out your clearance. That's a tone and a half. I think fretting it correctly, that's working. That's good. So I'm happy with that. So we've done the G, we've done the thing. Right, let's recalibrate for the B and the E, and these should be fairly straightforward now because they always are the simpler of the levelings. But I don't ignore them because you don't really want frets that have just been touched at one end and untouched at the other. It's better to bring them down in similar. You know, if these had to come down a bit, it's better to bring the other ones down too. Okay, so B track. And as I said, I kind of half expect to see the 16th fret untouched over here. It's a bit difficult to see actually because we've run out of, in the bending, I've run out of marker pen. So I'll just put a tiny bit more on and just go over it again and see if we're missing it, just out of interest. That's actually touching now, so we've got a difference at this side of the radius, which is interesting. So over here it was definitely quite a bit low, so now we know we've got a little dip on that side of the fingerboard, which doesn't track all the way across, which is interesting. So if you didn't know that could happen, you do now. Same way as I'm sure many of you have looked at the relief, checked for the relief on your necks on two different sides, and it's dead flat on this side or something touching, and on this side there's a gap. And you think, how is that possible that this side of the neck is a straight line and this one's got a bow in it? And it feels really bizarre, but it is the case. Fine. And then we'll do the final one now. Okay, so I'll check the time in a minute, but having done the precision part of it, if you like, the precise part, it's always good because you can think what we've done by this point is we've leveled. See, that one's low here on this side, so this one was low on that side, this one is low on this side, so it's kind of maybe a little dip here and a little dip on that side. Yeah, so good thing about getting to where we are now is that from here on we can do anything we like. We can take the strings off, we can take the guitar apart, put it back together again, put the same gauge of strings on, tighten it up to pitch, and it will go, the neck will revert back to its original sort of position. And the thing about this is that the reason I level with the neck under tension anyway is because there is something that happens when the strings are pulling the guitar neck in this direction, in a longitudinal compression, you might say. And that does something to the neck and causes this little bit of bunching. And sometimes that's what causes that little ditch up that end that isn't on the other frets, and so on. Okay, it's 1:45. Yeah, still got some time to finish the frets. Yeah, so this compression kind of, instead of it being a smooth curve or whatever it's meant to be, can actually lead it to be a little wobbly. And in this case, we're seeing it a little bit wobbly, a little dent over there, and a little dip over here. And that will possibly disappear if you take or you certainly won't know it if you take the strings off and you set the neck flat and you radius it with a block. Sorry, you level it with a radius block. Because what happens when you make it all level that way, you then put the neck under load again, and what you had as a perfectly relatively even set of frets then do this strange bunching thing, which is very minimal in one sense, but it's enough to let me do something first. It's minimal, but it's enough to cause that little dip. Why? What is it with E strings that keep breaking every time I undo them? They don't like being undone. That's really, really strange. I'm literally just undoing these strings, and 3 times in a row now the E string is broken whilst undoing it. I didn't put these on here, did I? No. So these were fitted. What were the last 3 guitars that I had this problem with? They were Tele's. Is this something people in factories do with the last E string? They tie it in a knot that's gonna, it's not gonna break when it tighten it when it goes undone, but it breaks. Look at that. What I was going to do is I was going to slack these off if I don't break any more strings. How weird. I literally did that on 2 successive Tele acoustics, and I could not find an explanation to suit me of why that was doing it. But it just did, and I had to find, I did it on yesterday's Tele, I had to find a replacement string from an electric set just to do the setup part of it anyway. It wasn't for any other reason. But now what I'm doing here is, because I know that my saddle nut was sitting tiny bit high, I can afford to clean up a little bit more glue out of this slot. Now what that means in practical terms is that it will the risk of doing this after you've decided that your nut is at the right height, if you did, is that this can lower it slightly, but I don't mind it, this slot being very slightly lower, because it just means that I'll lose a little bit of that extra height that I've got, which I actually can afford to lose. So it's kind of keeping that in mind as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a tiny bit of glue, and I'm going to dab it on here and put this in place. I don't want much. Technically, you probably, ideally, well, it's going to touch at any place, but we'll ideally put it, where should we put it? Just along the middle a bit there. Let's make it sure. Let's just get these out of the way first. Drop it in there, line it up, and press it down. Okay, and for a split second, let me just put this string on. And this one. And this one. What is wrong with these things? Maybe that was my fault. I'd over-tightened that one already. Right. Anyway, that's fine, because all I wanted to do was hold the nut down. But I didn't do that on the high E, I promise you. I promise you, honestly, I promise. Okay, that's just going to hold that down. So long, 2 broken strings. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. That's fine. Lovely, lovely. Okay, we are done, and these are going to go in the bin. So he's frightened of breaking a string on undoing it. So what we get to do is we'll do the frets just now, and then we might leave it till Sunday to just do the tuner swap over, depending on how the timing. And also what happens is if the batteries run out, I tend to get caught like that. Thank you. Broken strings, take these broken strings. Whose song was that? Some 80s thing, wasn't it? Broken wings. Learn to fly again. Learn to fly. Something, something. let's just double check one thing while I've got these free to grab hold of. It's very difficult. These what do you call them? Digital calipers are not as accurate as I'd like them to be. This is coming, it's saying it's 42, right? It's not coming out at 46, so that is a 9 set, which is fine. Okay, so let's just get these out first. One thing about setups I would say is always assume, always assume that your saddles are going to move themselves, even if you don't physically touch them from this point onwards. Somehow, moving the guitar around can cause the grub screws to sort of rattle around, go up and down of their own accord. So it's very difficult. Well, you can't trust it to stay in the same place, is the basic advice. So be ready to reset the action when you're done. Okay, so I'm just going to brush off some of the dust. Anybody, I've said this loads of times before, but if you're worried about fret dust and magnets, the fret dust is not magnetic, period. It just isn't. So don't fret yourself, don't worry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here, zoom in a bit, and we're going to do some fret crowning, and for that we're going to use a, where did I put the other one? I put it somewhere that I can't find it. Well, I'll use that one. So I'm going to first of all mark off all the frets again, and then we're going to use the StewMac diamond coated concave offset crowning file. Price $150 or something, I can't remember now. It was quite a lot, but I do not regret it. It served me 9 years and counting still, so who could complain about that for a tool? You can do it using a 3-corner file. It's perfectly doable, and in some ways actually I will say it's a little bit more accurate if you do it with that tool. However, it's quicker, and if you do loads of these every day, you'll be much happier using the StewMac type tool. Okay, so the idea is I'm using this tool to round off the flattened parts of the fret, or put the fret where I flattened it to achieve fret levelness. I'm going to sneeze. There's no point looking over there because I've taken the microphone with me. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so we're just, this concave file basically softens off the edges of the flat spot that we created in the leveling process, and just make sure that it returns the fret to an arch shape, which it prefers to be. Some factories level frets and just offer the fretboard up to a buffing wheel, and just polish it out, and they can get away with it because most of the time the fret leveling isn't so extreme that it moves the flat spot, significantly moves the intonation point along the fret, but technically speaking it does. And you know, if you have to do a lot of heavy leveling on anything, that can move it as much as a millimeter or a millimeter and a half, and that, you know, that can have an impact if you're very precisely musical. Your ears are very sensitive to that. We don't want to have the intonation point, like ideally to be at the center of the arch, top of the arch. So we don't want to be moving it a millimeter in that direction. So I'm moving through these pretty quickly, so that gives you an indication that there isn't a lot of metal been reduced during the leveling process. No matter what it looks or sounds like, the combination of the leveling process plus being able to do this each time really is what tells you, gives you the experience of knowing how much you're taking off and how much you can afford to take off. And that is something that can only come with experience. You simply can't know it before you've done several, if not dozens, of these setups. So while you can, you know, I've said to people many times, you can learn this method from any of my videos. the reason I made and I sell an ebook showing how I do it is because it really does come down to the amount of time you spend practicing it and your ability to learn from doing it. You can get a good result first time, and most of the people who do it do get that good result, but I think most people also understand how much better how much more confidence they get over time in using the method, because it is no different from any other tool or process. Experience is invaluable, and it stops you from panicking and thinking you've overdone it or making the wrong decision and stopping. In the past I've been known to when somebody's brought a guitar and said there's a choke here, and I just desperately I want a low action, but you please get rid of that choke, whatever it takes, get rid of it. And sometimes my natural inclination has been to wimp out before, because I'm always terrified of wanting to preserve fret metal, and so I've wimped out and not continued leveling enough, because I err on the side of caution typically, and as a result, they've still got a bit of buzz at a certain action. So just wanting to, just being kind of keen to not overdo it is very easy to, it can make you overcautious. But then some people have also have not understood the limitations or the limits of what this can do, and some people have kind of piled in and taken away a ton of material, desperately trying to get somewhere they can't actually get with the process, because, for example, the let's say it was a 7.25 inch radius. There's a limit to what you can get in terms of low action. Excuse me. And if you don't know that, you can run the risk of carrying on, thinking away, whatever the word I'm looking for, carrying on fret leveling, thinking you're gonna get rid of that last little bit of buzz. And if you know the kind of limitations involved, you know that it's a 7.25 radius. The geometry is against you. Experience shows me there's a minimum playing action you can set, assuming a relatively flat radius, not radius isn't the word, a flat relief curve, and the concession you have to make to that geometry is that you basically have to have a little bit, your target action is a little bit higher than it is on a 9.5 and above. So that's one of the kind of things that really comes with experience, and it's great to know, because you don't get freaked out thinking this worked on my Les Paul, but it's all gone horribly wrong on my vintage Strat or whatever. And straight away, you could probably work out from what I just said that a 12-inch radius Les Paul or SG will tolerate a lower action pound for pound, a lower action, a flatter relief curve, and so on. So that's just the way it goes. Okay, so obviously what I'm doing right now is I'm having done the leveling, having done the re-crowning, I'm now masking off the neck, ready to polish out the frets. So like I said, the precision part of it, getting the nut right and getting the frets right, is done. And the rest is going to be polishing the frets, cleaning everything up, and then finally changing out the tuners, which is straightforward, touch wood. Changing out the tuners and changing out the scratch plate, which is a little bit of undoing of pickups and making sure wiring's in place and so on. Undoing one pickup. But sometimes I kind of a bit more brain off at this point, because I've done the concentrating E-bit. I may have to do, if I'm not absolutely happy with the first fret action I may have to do a tiny little adjustment with the nut slots, but I doubt I will. I think with that last little bit of glue scraped out of the nut slot, I think that's going to be pretty much on target. But it's no big deal. What I tend to do, if there's the tiniest adjustment required, I am happy to do it, because it also means that the nut files, they not only will take me to the correct first fret action, but they also have the sort of feel that, okay, I've widened the slots a tiny bit as well, which is never a bad thing. So because I did a leveling early on, I prepared a bunch of cut bits of this stuff, masking tape, thinner cut bits, so I can just pluck it straight from my tile, which is a funny odd thing to use, but I used to do it on a wooden surface or a melamine, you know, IKEA surface, that white plastic covered wood chipboard, plastic covered chipboard, you know the stuff I mean. Anyway, and that just sort of shredded under the sheer number of times I cut down to cut these little thin strips. So somebody said, why don't you use a tile, a big tile? And I found some cheap big tiles in the recycling centre and bought a couple, and so I've been using this big tile ever since, which is fantastic because it never, you know, stays intact, unlike the bits of wood. But the problem with the tile is that it kills the blades. So in a way it would be better off if I was cutting to cut these strips, if I was cutting into a wooden substance, it'd be far better. But you know, it's you know, six of one, half a dozen of the other, ain't it, really? Because you either kill your blades or you're killing the cutting surface, whichever you prefer. Anyway, haven't talked much about the ye olde state of the world in my last video, one or two videos. In fact, I haven't done that many. Been doing quite a bit of work on Andrew's Chibson-y style things, which are off-camera sort of jobs. Oh look, these are not. See, like, it's the other downside. This doesn't quite cut through. If it's too hard a material, the tile, it's kind of killed off the blade before we even get to cutting the bits we need. Anyway, yeah. So I've been doing quite a bit of Andrew type builds, and that's basically off-camera. You know, it's not recorded. They take so long that it would be the most dreary forever videos, and partly dreary because it's dreary and I'd just be talking to myself endlessly, and you. But it's also dreary because it would just bring a ton of criticism, because people would see the quality issues. You know, the first three that I did came from a particular supplier. Amazingly, were really decent, you know, decent quality chassis to build or to, you know, upgrade on. Now, you know, the whole business about whether or not they're worth doing is another thing altogether. But anyway, but I've gone off on a detour. The reason I was saying that I've been doing those is because hence I've not been doing many videos, setup videos, but you know, I've done a couple, and well, the last ones I think I was talking a bit about the state of the world, but you know, it hasn't really improved. I suppose what's changed is we've obviously the US Senate, of whatever part of it is, has voted to supply Ukraine with weaponry. You know, and I know that some people would immediately disagree with that, and I can't see any. to be honest, if you have a leader who's intent on moving, actually, I tell you who I take. I'll be straight. I tell you who I take my cue from. Bill Browder. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Bill Browder. He was a founder of the biggest hedge fund investing in Russia at one point, and he and his lawyer unearthed Russian corruption, and Putin, of course, was implicated right in the middle of it, and so the Russians didn't like him very much, and Putin set out to get him, but Browder was able to kind of get out of Russia in time. But his lawyer, who was Russian, Sergei Magnitsky, wasn't able to get out, and Putin put him in jail and eventually killed him in jail, rather like Navalny and others before him. Anyway, so Bill Browder was so shocked by that, and clearly was still a wanted man on Putin's list of most hated, that he decided to dedicate the rest of his days, by the looks of it, to creating or fighting for the justice for his friend and lawyer Sergei Magnitsky. And it was Bill Browder who got the Americans to bring in the Magnitsky Act, which made it much easier for Western governments to stop Russians benefiting from fraud, shall we say, to stop the Russian leadership benefiting and moving money around. So anyway, since then, Browder has been a top enemy, and he has the sort of lived experience, and I have to say, I'm not ashamed to say, I take my cue also from the nature or the demeanour of the man himself, and I find him highly credible in all kinds of ways, not least because of his experiences. But anyway, so the point is that bringing a long thing short is that Bill Browder says that, and I think his description was fantastic. He said that Putin was a small, inadequate man who had stolen too much, and now had to keep on fighting wars to remain popular or to retain control, basically. And it's absolutely nothing new in history that war is the one way to retain control when it looks, especially when it looks like the finger might be pointing to you, and him and the oligarchs, or Putin via his oligarchs, has robbed the Russian people of about $1 trillion worth of wealth, and whilst the people poop in rusty huts in the middle of the street, and it was starting to come to a head that they were dissatisfied with their lot, and his popularity was falling, and then he's made himself super popular again and super relevant, and bestowed upon himself effectively lifetime powers. Like I say, that's always the hallmark of the criminal tyrant, really. So, and Browder says very clearly, and I totally also agree with this, Browder says that the whole business of even the commentators who talk about Putin wanting to recreate the former imperial glory, blah blah blah, and I've fallen into that trap of saying that line. In fact, that's not even true. It's not even as complex as that. He doesn't care about any imperial glories or historical context. He doesn't even care about being, Peter the Ugly or whatever. It is brilliantly put, where he said, the man has now stolen too much to be able to do anything else other than wage a war that allows him to retain control, remain in control. And of course, the question when people say, well, Mr. Browder, is he going to stop? Is he going to continue on? And Bill Browder quite rightly points out that he cannot lose in Ukraine, because the minute Putin loses in this war, from this point onwards, or from 2014 onwards, the minute he loses, he will be chucked into prison. He'll lose control, and he'll lose his money, the money he's stolen, and it will equal death. It'll be literally probably a death in prison. So that's kind of, I think that's the most accurate thing, that the man isn't fighting for some principle or logic that we can evaluate him by. He's fighting to retain control, and there's no price that's too high. And I think the thing that the West doesn't fully understand is that when you're dealing with somebody who's only fighting for their life, i.e. to remain in control, to preserve your life so you aren't thrown in jail, actually it's far more dangerous than somebody who's has the logic of, I want to be remembered as a great person who took back Lithuania or whatever. That's way off track, I think. Anyway, so that's who I listen to. I listen to the Poles and their experience. I listen to the former, people of the former Soviet Baltic states who know Russian, who know what it's like to live under Russian control better than we do. So it comes back full circle to the fact that I'm not naive, and I'm not a warmonger, and I'm not a sheeple of the military-industrial complex, yada yada yada. I would like peace more than anything in the world. I'm the kid, remember, who grows up in like many of you would, grew up in the 60s and into the 70s, when you thought we were entering an age of reason and progress. A ho ho ho. And then we to be disillusioned a bit, but so I'm absolutely against war, but I'm more against lives being taken by a pathological thief who will waste any number of human lives to retain power as he experiences it in a day-to-day. And that's where we're at, and so that's why I do support it being, I do support Ukraine being able to defend its own freedom, its own right to choose. Helping somebody has never been a wrong thing to do when you're confident that somebody is expressing a democratic decision to stay free from somebody else. And actually the point that Bill Browder was making is that even if, and probably especially, of course, if Russia were to win in Ukraine, it would move onwards into another state, Moldova, Lithuania, Latvia, whatever. And the reason it would is because, for the simple purpose that he needs war to retain control. Without it, his popularity wanes, and the true nature of the average Russian's life, I'm not talking about those people who live in St. Petersburg and Moscow, but the masses of people in Russia, the reality of their lives becomes unbearable. So I'm afraid that's where I stand on it. So I'm heartened in a sense that Ukraine has more support to defend itself. If the Ukrainian sovereign Ukrainian government, not fake referendums and gunpoint voting and all that crap. But if the Ukrainian people actually, en masse, a majority, wanted to submit to Russian rule, then that would be their business, and I wouldn't, it wouldn't be a case. It wouldn't be me recommending they fight for my interests if they aren't their interests. If you get what I mean, that would be their choice. Just as it was North Korea's choice to be communist leaning, or it was, Vietnam's choice. That's their business. The problem is with Russia is you rarely find a situation where people choose that without Russians being behind it, because that's the best way of making it go the way they want, is to sneak in under peacekeeping guises and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I'm glad that they have the support. I don't feel any more optimistic about the long term, for the reasons I've talked about in other videos. I don't really see, when you are facing somebody for whom defeat means personal death, as far as they understand it, loss of control and death, then I think we're in a far more dangerous position than if it was a genuine rational individual who was just trying to claw back some states, or territories that he remembered were part of the homeland when he was a kid or something. That would be more understandable, and there would be more rationality behind that. I think when it's an individual who will, as Browder said, who has now stolen too much to stop, and too much to be able to enjoy spending his money and live in sort of peaceful whatever. It's too late for that now. And that I'd never really thought about this concept of stealing too much, and actually for the first time today it really kind of struck me. That's a very good way of putting it, and it also points to the unending pit of greed, that you can't stop at enough billions to enjoy, I don't know, building your own space base, or what should we say, living in your holiday dacha or whatever, in as many months of the year as you care to. It's not even that. It's, you have to steal. You're so damaged. You have to steal into the trillions of dollars. That's, of course, that's where the thievery is. I don't know. It's a psychological. It's disturbed, isn't it? It's not. I mean, taking your country's wealth and spending it on yourself is a bad thing. Oh look, we've got two little. I suppose we've got the two little dents on the other one. Yeah, I mean, stealing your country's money is a bad thing. First of all, that's pretty rotten. But stealing trillions of your country's money and throwing away hundreds of thousands of lives, so you can carry on stealing more, and killing people so you can steal more. It's just, God knows why. Well, we do know why those people end up running countries. It's because nobody else can be bothered, mainly. And also, normal, healthy people don't have the same drive to be powerful politicians, isn't it? I mean, that's the bottom line. Is all the people say, you wouldn't catch me wanting to be a leader of a country. Imagine living day to day under the fear of being assassinated just because you're doing this job called being president or whatever of USSR, president of Russia or America. Would I give up my lazy hammocking days or my tweaking guitars in a workshop on a recycling plant? Would I give all that up to be leader of Russia? You're joking, aren't you? I wouldn't risk You know, having people, actually deranged people, wanting to kill me because I had some views about how it should be run, or God, what a, you know, the same ways that most big stars find out eventually that their fame tends to bring them mostly a terrible lack of privacy and a terrible insecurity, you know, that no amount of earnings from their latest records can offset. So no, I wouldn't do it. I think you've got to be mad to do it. Mad, deranged, over-ambitious, nutcase, whatever. Hey, look, welcome, Mr. P. So, you know, is it any surprise that countries' power is seized by damaged people? You know, it's that old story of, it should be that, I'm hoping that these are in the correct, are there any particular order? Yes, there are. Those are shorter. So we're going to assume, I'll make an ass of you and me, we're going to assume that the longer ones are in fact where they should be. Let's do that correctly, shall we? Where's the, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, 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 oh dear. Oh, bloody, bloody dear. Oh dear. These are right-handed. Ay, ay, ay. Did you not realise that, Lawrence? Who? Right. This is going to have to go back up. Where did I put the box just now? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? It didn't come in a box, it came in cellophane. Am I insane? This is the... Is that the short, tall one? I can't remember now. So that cannot... I need that too. There's no way... Sorry, I know this is ridiculous. That could go there, but it can't go there. Can that go there? Well, it can't go there. So that can only go there. Right, I'm not mad. Sometimes this left and right thing can do my head in. So that is unusable. It doesn't say anywhere, and it may well be that the business that sold these has sold them as left-handed. It may be their oversight. So either which way, they've got to go back. Oh well, and what we've now got to do is put the originals back on. I'll put them on for now, because they're easy enough to change anyway. So the whole point being that Lawrence can, if he orders another set, he can put them back on. Now I've got to make sure I know where I've taken this one from. This one from this end, I think it is. Oh look, that's the right way around. Damn. Yeah. Anyway, so who wants power? Not me. Gosh no. No, thank you. But then, but I guess that comes down then ultimately to the thing I've always thought is that the idea of there being any power to be had by individuals, you know, the idea of leaders. I know it's been constant throughout humanity, but there are structures around the world, communities and peoples who live by more communal or council type structures, and no, they're not as, you know, maybe they don't get some of the things done that strident leaders get done, but maybe they create better all-round well-being than the idea of the sort of powerful vertical of power, hierarchy of power type of leadership. We seem to have learned this power corrupting and absolute power corrupting absolutely principle. We just seem never to take that on board. Anyway, so I think, well, I don't think I actually know But if we have any future, and I'm not sure we do at this point in time, but if we are to have a future, it's going to have to be with, we're going to have to move to some other kind of power structure. I mean, it's not going to work the way we're doing it at the moment. Okay, so that's that bit. Now we've got a changeover of a pick guard, we hope, and I guess I might as well carry on now while we're at it. I've got to get out and play tomorrow, but it's not too early. So what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to take this off and I'm going to explore how likely it is that our placement fits. Now some people get absolutely freaked out with the sight of a power driver near a guitar or pick guard or whatever, and you'll see me always holding the thing so I can control it, because I also know that it's potentially a dangerous thing, so I'm very cautious. And the first thing I always do is I turn the screwdriver to make sure that the bit is engaged. Wow. Hello. Okay. Look at the size of these holes and the dust surrounding them. Blimey. Okay, so this should be straightforward. I'm going to remove this and replace that. Now this has got its thing on, and there's not that much. I tend to leave this on for the customer to take off, only because sometimes it can get. No, let's think. But I'm not actually convinced this even fits yet, so let's not take that off. Yeah, I don't want the customer to get a scratched thing back. So this should be a good fit. That looks pretty good. I'm going to trust that to be a fit. So the first thing I'm going to do, next thing I'm going to do, is take off the pickup, and the other side. And this has rubbers on it, so they should be straightforward. Let's take out the screws. Unfortunately, these rubbers, they're nice little rubbers, but they don't grab the way the other, the PVC ones, no, it's the latexy, squishy ones do. They tend to grab onto the bolt here, which means they can hang there without them falling off or risk. Okay, so now we'll do the same on that side. Wow, that is quite, oh, that is a massively different spacing. Ay, ay, ay. That's terrible. We can't use that. Holy cow. Look at the gap. That's in, this is made for a standard pickup, but look, the spacing on the Tele neck pickup, can you see how it's pulling it into that side, which fits, and then there's about a mile on this other side. Oh, this is a pretty unsuccessful thing. Right, listen, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to end this video. I'm going to take this, I'm going to replace the original pick guard. I'm going to take this guitar home, minus the strings. I'm going to put this original back on, and I'm going to offer Lawrence the choice. If he wants me to hunt down the right thing, which maybe it's not quite as easy as it ever sounds, we can try and hunt down the right thing either together, or I can do it, or we leave it as is. So we've succeeded in a big fat nothing, and yet I've had to do the checking and attempting, but hey, it's not exactly a huge detour, is it? Hey, right. Yeah, and so it would be crazy for me to put the strings on right now, because we might decide that we're going to try again and find the right plate, in which case we don't want to be chucking strings away for no good reason. Put this down to minimum screwdrivering. That's amazing. It's not often I've been thwarted as thoroughly as that. But anyway, the main part of it's done. Now this now doesn't fit. How odd is this? So these don't really want to fit around this. Right, that's a tight fit. I have to actually press that down before I put the screws in, or else it won't fit. How weird. Weird, weird, weird. Very tight tolerance. Yeah, so yeah, we will just, I'll take some strings home. So Lawrence has the option, if he'll do this plate and the tuners later, then I can finish the stringing up, and he can play it until such times as the new tuners and new plate comes in. So I found the box for the plate. How strange. What I will do before I put it back in its case is I'll give it a little sloosh. Yeah, look at that. That is a single coil pickup, not a Tele single coil pickup. It's a Strat single coil pickup. But there we are. Who knows? It's difficult, isn't it, when you're buying off of online, as I always like to say grammatically, annoyingly, just to be a savage Philistine linguist. Anyway, well, we are where we could get to. So tonight I'm going to go home, have something to eat, watch a bit of YouTubey nonsense, plan which guitar I'm going to take with me tomorrow to practice, play, jam, whatever it's really called. See what songs I know of the 5 or 6 that were proposed. Dave only managed to propose yesterday. Come on, lad. Anyway, we know some of them. We played them before. Okay, so look, that's going to be it. The strange case of the really not very correct components ends with this one going back in the box, and both of them, I think they're probably, I think the best thing to do, rather than me sending them around, they're probably both best go back in, but I'll double check, and we'll get some 9s which are here. We'll put them in the box with the guitar, and we'll take that one and its strings and a few bits and pieces, and we'll take them both home, and we'll go from there. So I'll see you after the practicing tomorrow. I'll see you probably sometime Sunday for another session up here. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.